Trigger warning. The following video contains fleeting mentions of DV and loss of life. If this is triggering for you, please use the resources below and consider not watching. Hope you take care of yourself. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Anna. I'm a clinical psychology doctoral candidate, and on this channel we talk about real-life applications to psychology. Today we're talking about Gabby Petito's case and what it can teach us about how to psychologically self-protect. First of all, my condolences to Gabby Petito's family. At the time that I'm recording this, there isn't much known about what actually happened, and I hope that they do get the closure that they deserve. I'm glad what happened to Gabby is receiving the coverage that it deserves about the widespread horrific treatment of women. I also hope that in the future all women will receive the same coverage. If you don't know, more than 5,590 Native American women were reported missing in 2019 alone. In Wyoming, the state where Gabby went missing, 710 Indigenous people, mostly girls, went missing over the past decade. It's estimated that in between 63,000 and 73,000 Black women and girls have gone missing in the USA, but unfortunately they're usually classified as runaways and not taken seriously as missing persons cases. And so I hope that we can continue to bring awareness to these issues and send the message that all women are worthy of the same empathy and attention as Gabby Petito. With that in mind, this month's fundraiser is the NCADV, the National Coalition Against DV. This is a collective community that has grown to empower survivors and their stories. This charity works on uplifting advocates and survivors while holding offenders accountable, and it has various projects and services such as a dedicated public policy office, educational and financial webinars, and a youth curriculum called Take a Stand for Healthy Relationships. The NCADV has made contributions to various policies such as the Violence Against Women Act and the Victims of Crime Act. As always, please consider donating to this month's charity. If you can spare even the equivalent of a sandwich, that's more than nothing. And if you can spare more, certainly I hope you consider doing so. Moving on to today's topic, this will not be a rundown of what happened in Gabby Petito's case, but rather just I want to share my psychological reflection on the case with the intent of empowering you, the viewers, so that you can take steps to protect yourself if you ever find yourself in a similar situation. That is my intention with this video, to explain how to psychologically protect yourself in a situation such as this. If you're not familiar with Gabby's case at all, here's just a brief overview. In August, a 911 call sent the police to the vehicle of Gabby Petito, where she and her fiance, Brian Laundrie, were in a domestic dispute. The man who called 911 said he saw the man in the vehicle slapping the woman in the vehicle. When the police arrived at the scene, they questioned both Gabby and Brian separately, and in the police report, they called Gabby emotional and confused and determined that Brian was the victim and Gabby was the aggressor. The couple ultimately decided not to press charges, so the police let both of them go, and soon after, Gabby went missing and Brian returned home with her van, claiming not to know where she is, and he eventually disappeared, and a few days ago, Gabby's remains were found. So what we can learn from this, point number one, use emotional regulation skills to increase your chances of people empathizing with you in situations such as these. At the time when they were pulled over, Gabby was understandably upset. What the police officers referred to as confused and emotional is a very normal reaction for someone who has been victimized. Unfortunately, most people are not trained to understand trauma reactions, and they're very quick to blame the person who seems the most emotionally heightened at that time. They're quick to think, oh, this person's clearly unwell, they're hysterical, they must have been the one to instigate the conflict. Meanwhile, Brian appeared very cool, calm, collected during the questioning. This allowed him to build better rapport with the police officers, which I think ultimately contributed to why they saw him as the victim. Think about it this way. If someone baits you and baits you and baits you constantly, at some point you're going to explode. And they're going to look like the cool, calm, collected victim of your hysteria, when in reality they've triggered you over and over, and your reaction is understandable given what they've done. Also, I always take it as a yellow flag when someone seems eerily calm in situations where they should be experiencing some level of anxiety. Studies have shown us that psychopaths have lower levels of physiological arousal under stress, so they don't experience the same heart racing, sweating, hyperventilating, all the different symptoms of anxiety that are adaptive to feel under certain circumstances. This is likely because they feel pretty confident that they can manipulate the situation or outsmart the consequences of their actions. They feel pretty confident in the fact that they're not going to be punished for their behavior. So just remember that it's normal to feel anxious in situations such as being pulled over by the police. And if you're ever with someone who doesn't seem to be experiencing any sort of anxiety in a situation where they should be, just be careful about their behavior moving forward. As for your own emotional regulation, if you're being baited and triggered by someone, do try your very best to stay calm in the situation. And I know it's incredibly difficult and it's not fair to have to mask a normal emotional reaction in order to receive justice, but unfortunately life isn't fair. I've certainly been in a situation where someone was baiting and baiting and baiting and I eventually exploded, but it's just not in our best interest. Some emotional regulation techniques that you can use include the following, and many of these are included in a video that I previously made on guided relaxation, which I'll put somewhere up here if you want to take a look at that. Deep breathing. You can try to take 10 deep breaths before speaking to someone. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Inhale the flower, exhale the candle. Breathe from your chest, feel the oxygen filling your torso. Progressive muscle relaxation is another great one. Slowly tense up each and every muscle, starting from your toes all the way up to your head, and then release the tension. And at the end, do this with your whole body. So tense up your body for 5 seconds and then release and feel the relaxed sensation. Positive visualization can be helpful. You can imagine yourself in your happy place or put away your worries in great detail, very vividly, using all 5 senses. And I also have a video on emotional regulation from a DBT standpoint, dialectical behavioral therapy, with many more tips and skills on emotional regulation if that would be helpful for you. Remember, if you're emotionally dysregulated, it's not your fault. It's perfectly natural to experience after someone has transgressed against you, but it's in your best interest to regulate that when interacting with others so that you can maximize getting your needs met. Point number 2 that this case brought up: do not cast blame on yourself or apologize for things you do not have to apologize for. In the police body cam, I noticed that Gabby was doing a very good job of blaming herself for everything, and Brian was also doing a very good job of blaming her for everything. If you're dealing with an abuser, you need to realize that taking accountability for more than your share will be used against you. Someone might wrong you in 10 ways, but if you wrong them in one and you bring that up and take responsibility for it, they're not going to apologize for the 10 things they did. They're going to focus on that one thing you did and inflate it and blow it out of proportion until you completely forget the 10 things that they did to you. If someone's asking you about something, about a conflict that you had with an abuser, answer their questions directly and objectively, without embellishing or blaming yourself. Try to be really as concise as possible. For instance, if someone asks you, "Tell me what happened," don't go on and on about how you messed up and you're feeling so guilty and you promise you'll do better in the future. Simply state the facts of what happened, and you can be honest. You should absolutely work through your feelings and take accountability for things you might have done wrong and identify in what ways you can do better for next time. But that should be done with someone that you trust, who will keep your information confidential, who genuinely has your best interests at heart. Don't pour your heart out to strangers or people in positions to judge you, because that will be used against you. Also, try to minimize how much you apologize. If you did something to hurt another person, of course you should apologize, but a lot of survivors tend to over-apologize, which allows the other person to frame the situation as if the survivor is the one who did something wrong. Try to only apologize to the specific person you've hurt, not third parties who have nothing to do with it. Third parties will only use that as ammunition against you. Try not to apologize for small transgressions, when someone's trying to make you feel bad. So if someone says, "You're 3 minutes late to this meeting, how could you do this?" Instead of saying, "Yes, I'm so sorry, I don't know why my Zoom wasn't working, I promise I'll do better next time, please forgive me," you can simply say, "You're right, I am late. My Zoom would not load." Very objective, taking responsibility, but not over-apologizing for a minor transgression. Also, if someone's trying to cast you in a bad light or twist the facts, call them out on it. Politely, clearly, concisely correct them on what actually happened. For instance, if they're saying, "She was yelling at me and then she hit me on the arm and she pulled the steering wheel," you can say, "Actually, I raised my voice to let you know you were going past the speed limit. I did not hit you on the arm. I grabbed it to get your attention since my raised voice was not effective. I did not pull the steering wheel at any moment." Not saying this is actually what happened in their specific case, but just as an example. Point number 3, do not change your story upon their attempts at gaslighting you. I bring up the example of the steering wheel because in the body cam, Brian claimed that Gabby was grabbing the steering wheel, but she denied it in her separate questioning. I'm inclined to believe Gabby because she took responsibility for a lot of other things that time, some of which were things she should not even have apologized for, like defending herself against violence. Also, when the police confronted her about the steering wheel, she didn't get defensive at all. She simply said in a very quiet voice, "No, I didn't grab the steering wheel." If she had reacted defensively, it would have told a different story. Meanwhile, what I noticed about Brian was he actually at one point said, "I hope she's not saying too many terrible things about me," which to me indicates there were probably more things she could have said to cast blame on him. If someone is trying to gaslight you and trying to rewrite history, stick to your story. Even if they start to strike a little bit of doubt into you, stick to your original story. That initial seed of doubt is what gets people to question question their sense of reality and acquiesce to the aggressor's story. In this case, I think what helped Gabby stick to her story was the fact that when they were questioning them separately, she didn't get an opportunity to hear Brian actually gaslight her. If they had questioned them together and Gabby had heard Brian saying, "No babe, you pulled the steering wheel, remember?" she would have been much more vulnerable to his charm and manipulation, much more impressionable. So if possible, try to turn the volume down when someone's gaslighting you. Stop listening. Stop paying attention entirely to their manipulation, to what they're saying. Just repeat your story like a broken record. If possible, also try to write down what happened immediately after an incident like this in a journal or in a phone note. If you feel the need to write things down to retain your sanity, it's always a surefire sign that the person you're dealing with is emotionally abusive. But if you must stick around them, at least take these preventative measures against their gaslighting. Point number 4, be aware of DARVO. In my video on people who play the victim as an abuse tactic, I discuss DARVO in depth. It's a technique abusers use that consists of denying, accusing, reverse victimizing, and defending. For instance, they might deny that they did anything wrong, accuse you of doing something wrong, play the victim when in reality you were the one to be victimized by their actions, and continue to offend by transgressing against you. When watching that body cam, this was pretty clear to me. Through his collected demeanor and charm, Brian managed to paint himself as the victim to the point where one of the police officers actually started talking about how Gabby is the aggressor and Brian is the victim, and how it's just harder to pinpoint because you wouldn't think a woman can be an aggressor. They were even going to arrest Gabby. Now listen, I don't know the specifics of what happened in that car. I don't think any of us ever will, but I do know that only one of those people ended up in a body bag, and it wasn't Brian. And clearly people have no issue assigning blame to a woman, even in circumstances where she is the victim. There were unfortunately tons of people online claiming she was the one in the wrong, even after her remains were found. Society has no problem blaming women, none whatsoever. This police officer proves that. Unfortunately, when someone is playing the reverse victimization card, there's not much you can do except try to emotionally regulate, effectively communicate with people when someone's trying to tarnish your name, and stick to the facts of what happened. We just have to be mindful of the fact that this DARVO tactic exists. Do check out that video on playing the victim if you want a deeper dive into this. And point number 5, leave while you still can. Gabby was 23 years old with her whole life ahead of her. She had many years to heal from this relationship and to learn about all the psychological self-protection methods I just listed. But unfortunately, someone took away that opportunity. I know it can be incredibly difficult to leave such a situation, and I also know it can be very disempowering to have someone try and force you to leave a situation when you're not ready to leave it. But please use this case as motivation to help you get towards that goal of being safe, being with someone who treats you well. If someone is mistreating you in any way, shape, or form, leave. Leave early on. Leave at the first red flag. Red flags mean stop, do not go forward, or you will be hurt. Leave before they take away your ability to leave. I'll put down some resources in the description box if this is something you're struggling with. I hope this video was helpful to you all. Please consider donating to this month's charity. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you soon.